Welcome to our class about fallacies. A fallacy is, simply put, an argument that has gone wrong in some way. In general, it means something that is not true, but for our context, we are going to think about the structures that arguments take when those structures create a bad argument. So over the course of the semester, we've looked at many structures that create a strong argument, and now we're going to turn and think about how specific kinds of mistakes can repeat themselves in order to make a weak, poor, or just bad argument. There are hundreds of different structures that we could look at. There are many names of these fallacies, but we are going to look at 15 specific structures for the sake of not looking at 100 things, and just to be able to identify what I think are the most common. The first one that we're going to look at is the red herring. A red herring is an argument that avoids the issue in some way. If you think about a politician's answer towards some tough question when they want to make themselves look good without having to tell something that's not true, they'll answer in a slippery way, right? The name red herring comes from a story about being hunted by dogs, right? And they're on your trail, and so you take a bit of fish and you rub it into the dirt and toss it off into the woods, and that distracts the dogs and they go off hunting in the wrong direction. That is why it is called a red herring. So the example that I have here is Jones says, "Did you do your math homework last night?" And Tiffany responds, "Mathematics is so fascinating." Right? Tiffany is producing a red herring because her answer does not actually go towards Jones's question. So that is how a red herring fallacy works. It's avoiding the issue. The second one we will look at has this long Latin name, post hoc ergo propter hoc. It is the false cause fallacy, and you can call it post hoc for short or just false cause. It translates into English as after this, therefore because of this. So this is the kind of logic that you'll often see from superstitious people, right? So for example, I walked under a ladder and then I missed the bus. So I missed the bus because I walked underneath the ladder. Or I shattered a mirror in my apartment and then I lost my job. So I lost my job because I shattered the mirror, right? One thing happening after another thing doesn't mean that the first thing was actually the cause of that second thing. And saying that it was the cause without any kind of justification, that's the false cause fallacy or post hoc fallacy. The third one that we will look at is the slippery slope. A slippery slope describes a chain of events that is predicted will ultimately lead to a disastrous conclusion. So, for example, I don't know about you, but when I was taking health class in high school, I was told about these gateway drugs, right? For example, if you smoke marijuana, you'll be willing to experiment with stronger drugs, and over the course of time, by starting small, you'll end up living a disastrous, addicted life, right? So that you can also call it the snowball effect, right? Something starts off very small and ends up very big, and it's kind of just one thing leads to another, right? So the chain of events there is very important. The fourth is the hasty conclusion. A hasty conclusion is essentially a inductive argument with not enough evidence, right? And a weak inductive argument. So for example, Frank and John are both uncles. Both Frank and John are bald. Therefore, all uncles are bald, right? Not every uncle we know is bald just because these two are. It's a weak inductive argument, not enough evidence. Hasty conclusion. Number 5, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Interesting fallacy. Usually describes how a negative expectation leads to some behavior that in turn guarantees that expectation. So, for example, when if a teacher acts like a kid is going to be stupid, right, and treats them like they can't solve any problems, then that kid is going to grow up learning that they're not able to solve problems and therefore act stupid. Or if a teacher treats a kid like a criminal, then they'll learn how to, what people expect of them is some kind of criminal behavior, and then grow up to become criminals. Or if you imagine yourself that you're not going to be able to pass a test, so why bother studying anyway? And then the next day you go in to take the test, and sure enough, you fail it. Right? These are all self-fulfilling prophecies. The sixth we will look at is the ad hominem fallacy. It's another Latin phrase. It translates as to the man. It is another red herring. So it's a way of avoiding the issue that occurs by attacking someone's character. If you think about the way Trump acts when he's in a debate, right? I don't know if you'll remember the debate between him and Hillary when they were talking about taxes, and Trump mutters famously, "nasty woman," right? And talking about Hillary's character rather than addressing the issue of taxes made that an ad hominem attack. The example that I thought of here is, I think that we should walk instead of taking the subway. And the response is, that's because you're an idiot, right? It's attacking Jones. Tiffany in this case is attacking Jones's character rather than addressing the issue of maybe her feet are tired. I don't know. All right, number 7, the straw man fallacy. This is a very important fallacy to understand, especially in academic contexts. The straw man fallacy describes an argument which exaggerates or otherwise misrepresents someone else's claims in a way that makes those claims seem ridiculous or else poorly reasoned. Right? It's when you put your own words into your opponent's mouth, when you drag out their argument and make it seem like they said something that they weren't really trying to say. So for example, if Jones says, "I think we should walk instead of taking the subway," and Tiffany responds, "I'm not going to take 5 hours of my day walking there and back again," right? Jones wasn't necessarily saying that they should walk to and fro. He wasn't saying much. He was saying we should take a bit of a walk. And then Tiffany drags out his phrase saying that, what he's saying is much more strange than the way that he originally put it. In general, it's important in academics, especially because when you think about an argument that you disagree with, say an argument from an essay that you read, and then represent a thinker's arguments as being in some way simpler or more basic in any way than they really were, and you weaken your opponent's argument on account of you object to some specific aspect of it, that's always going to be a straw man. So just, making your opponent seem like they're weaker than they really are. And it's a pretty significant and common form of fallacy.